For most of recorded history, piracy in the galaxy had been treated like weather. You did not punish the storm. You factored it into your shipping costs, paid tribute to the right captains, and accepted that 1 in 12 hulls would never reach port. The Stellar Compact, that aging federation of 412 species, had built its commerce around this assumption. Pirate clans received professional courtesy. Their fleets were granted quiet berths in neutral stations. Their kings sat at the same summits as legitimate merchants, because everyone understood the arrangement. For 8 centuries, this had been the natural order of things. Then humanity arrived, and nobody quite knew where to seat them. Earth's accession to the Compact had been, by alien standards, almost embarrassingly polite. The humans signed every treaty offered. They asked good questions in committee. They paid their dues on time. The Thessic delegate, Ambassador Geoth, reported back to her homeworld that the new species seemed pleasant and unremarkable, perhaps even a little dull. She was wrong about that, though it would take her another 2 years to understand how completely. The first ripple came on a stale afternoon in the Compact archives. A clerk named Vraar, 3 molting cycles from retirement, received a transmission tagged with an unfamiliar prefix. The header read, Claim Submission, Vessel Loss, Underwriter, LLOYDS Interstellar Earth Branch. Vraar read it twice. Then he read it a third time, because the word claim had no analog in his species commerce code. He forwarded it to a supervisor, who forwarded it to a tribunal liaison, who forwarded it to legal. By the time the document reached the desk of Senior Adjudicator Cormana of the Skell, it had been forwarded 11 times and read by no one. The document itself was perfectly civil. The freighter Catherine Bell, Registry Earth Lagos, had vanished 3 weeks earlier in the Hexal Drift. Her cargo had included grain, medical isotopes, and a shipment of children's textbooks bound for the human colony at Anwa. The underwriters at Lloyd's wished to recover the value of the lost ship, the lost cargo, and the lost crew, totaling some 84 million standard credits. Attached was a list of suspects, 23 names with home stations, last known positions, and family registries. Cormana laughed when he read it. The Skell laugh in their belly cavities, a low rolling sound that carried down the corridors of the Compact Tower. Pirates? You did not name pirates in a document. You did not list their addresses. You did not present their grandmother's tax records as supporting evidence. He filed the claim under nuisance correspondence and went to lunch. 6 floors down, in the human delegation office, a small woman with iron-gray hair and reading glasses watched the rejection notice come back through her terminal. Director Myra Vance, head of Earth's newly chartered Asset Recovery Division, did not look angry. She did not look surprised. She looked the way a woman looks when she has bet on the rain and the rain has arrived. They threw it out, her assistant said. They threw out the first one, Vance corrected. Send the next 98. The assistant blinked. Ma'am. Every ship Earth has lost since accession, every cargo, every name we could verify, file them all by morning. Cite Compact Trade Statute, Section 4, Subsection D. They wrote it. We are simply asking them to honor it. Across the galaxy, in a smoky station called Vraar, the Scarvoon pirate King Scarnval of the Long Knife was being toasted by his lieutenants. They had taken 3 good hauls that month. Grain, isotopes, a pretty little Earth freighter named after some forgotten human queen. The crew had been spaced. The hull had been stripped. The ledger was full. Scarnval raised his cup of fermented marrow and grinned, with all 4 rows of teeth. He did not know that on the desk of every shipping clerk, insurance underwriter, and freight commissioner from Tau Ceti to the Orion Spur, a quiet human signature was being scanned into the system. He did not know that an entire civilization was learning, for the second time in its history, how to keep receipts. In the gray office on Earth's delegation floor, Director Vance picked up her phone. "Get me the legal team," she said. "We are going to need more attorneys." The galaxy did not understand at first what an insurance industry actually was. There were no analogues in the Compact's Commerce Code. Older species treated loss as fate, and fate did not file paperwork. The Thessic kept devotional ledgers, mourning what was gone the way one might mourn rain. The Skell calculated attrition into their pricing and considered the matter closed. Even the wealthy Vren, who built their economy on grain caravans, simply hired larger guards and absorbed what was taken. No one in 800 years had attempted to recover what had been stolen. Lloyd's interstellar Earth branch did not see things that way. Lloyd's was a human institution that had spent 400 years on a wet planet learning how to extract money from oceans, fires, hurricanes, and frauds. It had survived the burning of London, the sinking of every ship that ever sailed, and an entire century of aviation. It treated catastrophe the way a butcher treats meat. When Director Vance's team forwarded the rejected claims, Lloyd's did what Lloyd's had done since the 17th century. They sent investigators. Their first investigator arrived at the trading station of Hexmarrow in unmarked clothes. His name was Holly's Penn, 53 years old, a former forensic accountant from Manchester who had once put 3 sovereign nations into receivership over a tax dispute. He spoke through a vocal translator and carried no weapons, only a portable scanner and a leather notebook. Holly's Penn spent 11 days at Hexmarrow. He bought drinks for dock workers. He inspected manifests. He visited 3 scrapyards and identified hull plating from the Catherine Bell by its registry code, etched in metal that no acid bath had quite erased. He photographed everything. He cross-referenced everything. He filed everything. By the time he left, he had traced the grain shipment to a Vren merchant, the medical isotopes to a Scarvun broker, and the textbooks to a black market collector who had purchased them as exotic curios for his daughter. Lloyd sent 40 more investigators that month. In the smoky halls of Rock Tar, the Scarvun pirate king began to hear rumors. His broker at Hexmarrow had received a polite written demand from something called a subrogation officer. His grain buyer on the Vren caravan route had been arrested by his own people, who were embarrassed to discover their fingerprints on stolen Earth cargo. 2 of his lieutenants had vanished entirely, traced to a quiet detention station that flew no flag anyone could identify. Scarnval summoned his council. 40 captains, raiders all, sat around his long table of bone and metal. "They are sending clerks," he said, "clerks with cameras." The captains laughed. One of them, a hulking Scarvun named Drac the Younger, slammed his cup against the table. "Let them photograph. What will their pictures do, my king? Frame us in their courts." "That is precisely what they intend," Scarnval said. He did not laugh. He had lived a long time. He had survived the great purges of the old Scarvun warlords, the betrayals of the Vren alliance, the long famine of the outer drift. He had learned over those years to listen to the shape of a thing before he listened to its words. The shape of this thing did not please him. Far away, in the compact tower, Director Vance was holding her 99th and final court appearance of the month. The senior adjudicator, who had once laughed at her now, sat very still while she walked through the evidence. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She presented a single screen, and on that screen scrolled the names of 2,411 human crew members who had not come home. "You called these losses fate," she said. "We call them theft. The compact court will rule on which definition stands." The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then adjudicator Cormana, who had laughed 3 months ago, set down his stylus. He looked at the human woman, at her glasses, at her iron-gray hair, at the 1,700 pages of evidence she had filed against the Scarvun coalition. "You understand, Director," he said carefully, "that if this court rules in your favor, we have no fleet to send." Myra Vance smiled, very gently, the way an undertaker smiles at the grieving. "Adjudicator," she said, "we are not asking you to send one." The ruling came down on a Thursday. The compact court found, unanimously, that the Scarvun pirate coalition and 3 affiliated clans had committed unlawful seizure of human-flagged vessels under Compact Trade Statute. Section 4. Subsection D. The court awarded Lloyd's interstellar damages of 84 million credits for the Catherine Bell, with additional findings on 98 other lost ships totaling more than 6 billion credits in liability. The court also acknowledged, in a single careful paragraph buried on page 212, that it possessed no mechanism to collect. The compact had courts, it had treaties, it had 1,000 chambers of ceremony and 1,000,000 pages of trade law. What it did not have and had never built was a fleet authorized to enforce its own rulings against pirate clans. The pirates had been considered too embedded, too useful, too necessary to the natural attrition of commerce. The judgment, in plain terms, was a piece of paper. 3 human attorneys received the document in the Compact Tower's Grand Hall. They thanked the bailiff. They folded the ruling into a leather portfolio. Then Director Myra Vance, who had flown in for the occasion, walked to the lectern reserved for plaintiffs and spoke into the open chamber. On behalf of Lloyd's Interstellar, Earth Branch, and the affected families of the human commercial fleet, we accept the court's judgment, she said. We thank this body for affirming our claim. A polite murmur ran through the chamber. The Thessic ambassador inclined her long neck. The Skell adjudicators tapped their styluses against the bench, the closest thing they had to applause. Vance was not finished. Since the compact has acknowledged it possesses no enforcement mechanism, she went on, Lloyd's Interstellar hereby exercises its right under Section 4, Subsection D, Paragraph 11, to pursue private collection of the awarded damages. We will be filing notice with all affected member states by the end of the cycle. The murmurs stopped. Ambassador Geoth of the Thessic leaned to her aide and whispered, "What does that mean? Private collection." The aide checked his terminal. He read the relevant clause 3 times. He looked up at his ambassador with an expression no Thessic had worn in living memory. "It means," he said carefully, "that the humans intend to seize the pirates' assets themselves." Across the chamber, the Scarvoon observer, a junior captain named Vraar who had been sent to monitor the proceedings, stood up so fast his chair fell over. He scrambled out of the gallery and ran for the docks. By the time he reached his ship, the news had already left the tower on 100 encrypted channels. In Vraar, Scarnval received the report in his throne hall. His captains gathered around the long table again. The mood was different now. Drac the Younger did not laugh. "They will come for us," Scarnval said. "Let them come," another captain growled. "Vraar has never fallen. We have 800 ships. We have the deep tunnels. We have favors owed by half the compact." "Yes," Scarnval said, "we have all of those things." He drummed his clawed fingers on the bone tabletop. "And the humans have lawyers." "Lawyers do not fly warships." The old king looked up. His eyes were tired and clear. "Lawyers," he said, "tell warships where to fly." He gave his orders. Vraar's defenses were doubled. Every captain in the coalition was recalled. Favors were called in. Bribes were paid. A summit was hastily convened with 3 other pirate clans, and ancient rivalries were set aside for the first time in 2 centuries. The Scarvoon pirate king was many things, but he was not a fool. He had felt the shape of this thing, and he had decided to meet it with everything he had. It would not be enough. In Earth orbit, the Asset Recovery Division's fleet finished its final inspections. 12 heavy frigates, 40 escort hulls, 3 logistics carriers. Each one bore the same gray insignia on its prow, a balanced scale over a clipped wing, and beneath it in plain block letters the words Private Collection Agency, LLOYDS Interstellar. On the bridge of the flagship settlement of accounts, Director Vance accepted a final briefing from her fleet commander, a quiet former trade fleet officer named Soren Calder. "We are ready, ma'am." "Then we file," she said. The fleet jumped. Vraar was a fortress carved into the corpse of a dead moon. For 2 centuries it had served as the heart of the Skarvun coalition, a black warren of docks, tunnels, and gun emplacements wrapped around a hollowed-out core. Pirates from a dozen species had been born and buried within its halls. Its dockyards held the stripped bones of 2,000 captured ships. Its vaults held cargo from raids that predated half the compact's current treaties. It had never been attacked. The Skarvun believed it could not be. When the asset recovery fleet dropped out of slip space 12,000 kilometers from the moon, every defense klaxon on Vraar lit up at once. 800 pirate ships scrambled from their docks. Gun platforms warmed their long-range batteries. Sensor towers began their tracking sweeps, expecting to see a war fleet's worth of dreadnoughts. What they saw, instead, was 12 gray frigates in a tight formation, holding station outside weapons range. The flagship settlement of accounts opened a broadcast on every compact standard frequency. The signal was clean, courteous, and arrived with a translated text scroll for species that did not speak the human tongue. The face on the screen was not Director Vance. It was a man in his early 40s, with neat brown hair and the kind of expression a tax auditor wears when he has bad news for you. He introduced himself as Senior Adjuster Aaron Rourke of Lloyd's Interstellar. "Skarvun Coalition," he said. "This is a formal notice of asset seizure under Compact Court Ruling 9 Delta 4, dated this cycle. You are hereby informed that you have 72 standard hours to surrender all stolen Earth-flagged cargo, identified raiders, and the persons of 43 named individuals listed in the attached schedule." The schedule arrived as an attached file. It contained names, photographs, biometric scans, and known aliases. Skarnval's name was the first. "Failure to comply within the 72-hour window," Rourke continued in the same patient tone, "will result in forced collection. Lloyd's Interstellar reserves the right to recover the full awarded damages, plus interest, plus enforcement costs, by any lawful means available under Section 4, Subsection D. Thank you for your cooperation." The transmission ended. For a long moment, the bridge of every pirate ship in Vraar was silent. Then they began to laugh. The laughter spread through the fleet, through the docks, through the bone halls of the Warren. It was the bellowing, contemptuous laughter of an old empire of thieves who had heard threats before, who had buried their enemies under stripped hulls, who had never seen a human warship in their lives. Skarnval did not laugh. He stood in his command center, watching the gray frigates hold their formation, and he counted them again. 12. Only 12. With a handful of escorts and 3 logistics carriers, against 800 of his own. It made no sense. The humans were not stupid. He had read every report on their species. They were patient, deliberate, careful with risk. They would not have come with 12 ships unless 12 ships were enough. Which meant either the humans had grown foolish in their pride, or those 12 ships were not what they appeared to be. He summoned his chief gunner. "What do the readings say?" "Standard human frigate signatures, my king. Hull mass, drive output, weapon emissions, all within expected parameters." "And the escorts?" "Light, almost civilian. 2 of the logistics carriers appear to be unarmed." Skarnval bared his teeth, "And yet they sit there and tell us to surrender." "It is a bluff, my king. It must be." The old king did not answer at first. He watched the gray formation in his viewport, and he thought about a small woman with reading glasses, and about the careful way a creature behaves when it knows things you do not. "Open a channel to the human flagship," he said at last. "I will speak with their commander myself." The signal connected. This time the face on the screen was Director Myra Vance. "Pirate King Skarnval," she said with a small polite nod. "How can I help you?" 12 ships, human. 12 ships against 800. I would know what madness brought you to my door with such an insulting force." Director Vance considered him a moment through her reading glasses. Then she set them down on her console, folded her hands, and answered him. "Captain," she said, "the 12 ships are not the enforcement. The 12 ships are the witnesses." The channel went dark. Behind the settlement of accounts, slipspace tore open in a long bright seam. And the second wave arrived. 236 ships came through the breach. They were not pretty. They were not the carved warships of the older species, with their honor sigils and their carefully painted hulls. They were gray, blocky, utilitarian, built by an Earth that had spent 3 decades quietly producing them, while the rest of the galaxy assumed humanity was harmless. Each one bore the same insignia, the balanced scale over the clipped wing. The Scarvun fleet stopped laughing. Skarnval's chief gunner, who had reported standard parameters less than a minute earlier, stared at the new readings and made a sound no living pirate had heard him make before. The new ships were heavy. They carried capital-grade weapons. Their drive signatures matched nothing in the compact database. "My king," the gunner whispered, "they are not in the registry." "Of course they are not," Skarnval said. "The compact does not regulate insurance fleets." He gave the order to fire. The Skarvun batteries opened up first, 800 ships pouring everything they had at the Gray Formation. The deep gun emplacements on Vraar's surface joined them, lighting the dead moon with a hellish glare. For a moment, it seemed impossible that any fleet could survive that wall of fire. Then the human ships moved. They did not maneuver the way warships maneuvered. They flowed. The frigates split into precise lanes, each one peeling off to engage a specific target list. The logistics carriers, no longer pretending to be unarmed, opened their long bays and released swarms of drone fighters that did not attack ships at all. The drones flew to the pirate docks. They flew to the cargo holds. They flew to the registry vaults. They were not soldiers, they were inspectors. While the frigates traded fire with the Skarvun outer hulls, the inspectors photographed everything. Every stolen cargo container, every modified hull, every black market ledger. The data streamed back to the settlement of accounts in real time, where a quiet team of forensic accountants tagged each item with a claim number and an estimated recovery value. The battle itself was, by galactic standards, almost embarrassing. Human gunnery had been refined on a planet where every species hunted every other species for 10,000 years. Their fire control systems did not waste shots. They targeted drive cores, weapon mounts, and command bridges with patient, surgical accuracy. Pirate ships that should have lasted hours lasted minutes. Pirate ships that should have escaped found their slip drives precisely disabled by a single placed round and no other damage. Because a disabled ship could be salvaged, and a destroyed one could not. Salvage was, after all, the point. Drac the Younger died in his command chair when a human round entered his bridge through the only unshielded viewport on his ship. The hulking captain who had once mocked the idea of clerks with cameras took one breath, looked at the small, neat hole in his console, and slumped forward without a word. By the end of the second hour, half the Skarvun fleet was gone, captured, or fleeing. By the end of the fourth, the deep gun emplacements on Vraar had been silenced. The dock seals had been blown open by precise charges that left the docks themselves intact. Human marines, in gray armor with the balance scale insignia, were moving through the bone halls of the Warren with the calm efficiency of repossession agents who had done this before. They had not done this before, of course, but they had trained for it on every kind of warren a planet could offer: cartel compounds, drug fortresses, pirate ports in the Earth's own oceans, back when humans had still been small and had still hunted each other across salt water. In his command center, Skarnval watched his 800-year coalition end in 11 hours and 40 minutes. He did not run. He had lived too long to run from something he had felt the shape of in advance. When the Gray Marines came through the door of his throne hall, he was sitting at the long bone table with his hands flat upon it, the way one waits for a creditor. The lead Marine was a quiet woman with sergeant stripes. She looked at the old pirate king without anger. She unclipped a small device from her belt, scanned his face, and confirmed the match. "Scarnval of the Long Knife," she said, reading from her cuff. "You are detained pending recovery of 84 million credits per the Catherine Bell claim and additional damages totaling 6.4 billion. You have the right to legal counsel under compact statute. Please come with us." She offered him a receipt. It was printed on plain paper, signed by a forensic accountant, and stamped with a balanced scale. Scarnval took it. He read it once. Then, with a strange dignity, he stood and put out his wrists. "Tell your woman with the gray hair," he said, "that I have never been arrested before." "Yes, sir," the sergeant said. She suspected as much. The compact emergency session was convened within 3 days. It had not met on this kind of footing in a century. Every delegation arrived at the great chamber with their full retinue, their best translators, and their most senior legal counsel. The galleries above the floor were packed with observers from 100 unaligned species. The Vren caravan lords flew in personally. The Thessic mother speakers, who almost never left their homeworld, took the long flight to attend. The agenda had a single item: the human action at Vraar. The senior Skell adjudicator, Cormena, opened the session. His voice was careful, formal, and unmistakably angry. "Members of the Stellar Compact," he said, "we are gathered to address the most aggressive private military action in the recorded history of this body. The Earth Corporation known as Lloyd's Interstellar has, in seizing the Scarvun haven of Vraar, killed an estimated 4,000 sentients, captured another 11,000, and impounded assets valued at approximately 3 trillion credits." The chamber murmured. 3 trillion was a number no one had expected. "The human delegation is asked," Cormena continued, "to justify these actions before this body." Myra Vance walked to the central lectern. She wore a plain gray suit and carried a single thin folder. She set it down. She adjusted her reading glasses. "Members of the Compact," she said, "I will be brief because the matter is not complicated." She opened the folder. "For 800 years," she began, "this body has tolerated piracy as a cost of doing business. In that time, member states have lost an estimated 4 million ships, 80 million crew, and 17 trillion credits in cargo. These losses have been written off as natural attrition." She turned a page. "My division has spent the past 3 years gathering documentation on every claim that could be verified across all 412 member species. We have located records in 71 jurisdictions. We have cross-referenced shipping manifests, port logs, family registries, and pirate ledger captures. We have built, item by item, a complete accounting of the losses this galaxy has refused to acknowledge." She turned another page. "At the request of the Compact Court, I am now formally entering that accounting into the record. The total is 84 trillion credits, plus interest, plus the value of recovered lives." The chamber went quiet. "We are not, however," she said, "asking the Compact to pay this sum." A wave of relief moved through the gallery. "We are asking instead that the Compact license Lloyd's Interstellar and its affiliated underwriters to pursue full recovery on behalf of every claimant member state, with standardized authority to operate across all shipping lanes, board suspect vessels, and enforce judgments against named raider clans." She closed the folder. "In exchange," she said, "Lloyd's will assume all enforcement costs, all liability, and all responsibility for the safe conduct of galactic commerce. Every member state will pay a standard premium based on their fleet tonnage. Claims will be processed within 60 cycles. Cargo will be recovered or reimbursed. Pirate clans will be dissolved through lawful seizure." She removed her glasses. "We are not asking for an empire," she said. "We are asking for a contract." The chamber erupted. The argument lasted 7 hours. The Skell objected on principle. The Vren objected on jurisdiction. The Thesic objected on tradition. But under every objection ran the same calculation, performed quietly by every delegate with a head for numbers. The premiums Lloyd's was proposing were significantly less than what each member state was currently losing to piracy each cycle. Less, even, than what the Vren paid their pirate protection brokers under the old quiet arrangement. By hour 6 the objections had thinned. By hour 7, the smaller species had begun to caucus around the human proposal. The Thesic mother speaker rose at last and addressed the chamber. "This is not justice as we have understood it," she said. "This is something new. The humans have built a structure in which loss is no longer fate. I have lived many cycles. I do not know yet if I trust this structure, but I know that my own people have buried their dead under the old one for 8 centuries, and I am tired of burying them." She turned to the human lectern. "The Thesic will sign. One by need, then by want, then by simple weary arithmetic." The other delegations followed. The vote came after midnight, in a chamber lit only by the soft amber of the night lamps. It was unanimous. Director Myra Vance signed the contract with a black ink pen that she had carried from Earth for the occasion. She handed the pen to Adjudicator Cormana, who signed on behalf of the compact. He looked at her over the table. "You planned this," he said quietly. "From the first claim, you knew the court could not enforce. You knew we would have to give you the contract." "Adjudicator," Myra Vance said, "we planned this from the moment we read your trade code." She put the pen back in her coat pocket. "You wrote the law 800 years ago," she said. "We are simply the first to read it." 2 years later, the galaxy had changed in ways its older species were still learning to name. The Scarvum Coalition no longer existed. Its captains were either in detention on Earth-administered penal stations, working off their judgments under labor reclamation, or dead. The bone halls of Vraar had been cleaned, cataloged, and converted into the largest claims processing center in the outer drift. The balance scale insignia flew over its main gate. 3 other pirate clans had dissolved without a fight, surrendering to Lloyd's enforcement teams in exchange for reduced sentences and the promise of legal representation. 2 more had been broken in shorter, sharper engagements. The remaining clans, watching their cousins disappear into the human paperwork machine, had retreated to the deepest fringes of charted space, where no shipping lanes ran and no claims followed them. For the first time in 8 centuries, a freighter could cross the Hexal Drift without losing 1 in 12 hulls. The premiums paid for it. Every member state of the compact now paid Lloyd's Interstellar a fleet tonnage assessment, and in return, every flagged ship was insured against piracy, sabotage, and unlawful seizure. Claims were processed within 60 cycles, as promised. Cargo was recovered. Crews, where possible, were returned to their families. Where not possible, their families were paid. The galaxy was richer for it, not by a small amount. The Vren alone reported a 40% increase in caravan revenue within the first cycle, because they no longer had to factor attrition into their pricing. The compact court had begun to hire human clerks. Director Myra Vance, 61 years old and tired, sat in her gray office on the delegation floor and looked at a printout of the quarterly report. Claims processed, 612,000. Recoveries completed, 93%. Outstanding pirate clans, 11, all under active surveillance. Premiums collected, on target. Profit, substantial. Across from her, Senior Adjuster Aaron Rourke set down his coffee cup. "They are calling us a power in some quarters. They have called us worse. The Thesic are proposing we expand the contract, extend it to internal system piracy, smuggling rings, tax fraud." Vance smiled very gently. "One thing at a time, Mr. Rourke." There was a knock at the door. Ambassador Geoth of the Thesic stepped into the office. She had aged in 2 years in the way her species aged, her long neck a little more silvered. She inclined her head in the gesture of formal respect, which Thesic did not give lightly. "Director Vance," she said, "I came to ask you something I have wondered for some time." "Please, Ambassador." "When you arrived on the compact floor 2 years and 4 months ago with your first claim, the Catherine Bell, 84 million credits, we laughed at you. I laughed at you. I am not too proud to admit it. I remember. Did you know then that it would end this way, with the contract, with the fleet, with my people signing under their old grief?" Vance considered the question. She set down the quarterly report. She looked out the wide office window, where Earth's blue arc curved against the dark, and she thought about her grandmother, who had worked the claims desk during the third great hurricane of her century, and who had taught her a thing or two about water and fire and what it took to make a civilization pay attention. "Ambassador," she said, "I did not know it would end this way." "No. I knew it would end one of two ways. Either the compact would pay the claims, in which case the galaxy would have learned that loss is not fate, or the compact would refuse, in which case it would have to give us the contract, and the galaxy would learn the same thing through a longer road." She picked up her coffee. "We were not trying to build an empire, Ambassador. We were trying to teach a galaxy how to keep receipts." Giuth was quiet a long moment. "You have done so," she said at last, "whether we wanted it or not." "You wanted it," Vance said gently. "You did not know you wanted it." The Thesic ambassador inclined her head one final time, the deeper bow this time, the one her species reserved for those whom history would remember. Then she turned and left the office. Myra Vance went back to her quarterly report. Out beyond the window, in the long lanes of the galaxy, a small freighter named the Diane Hartwell completed its run from Tau Ceti to Anwa without incident. Her cargo arrived intact. Her crew went home to their families. Her captain, a young woman on her first command, filed the standard arrival paperwork at the Anwa port and thought nothing of it, because she had been raised in a galaxy where ships came home. She did not know that she was the first generation to be raised that way. She would not be the last.